Ops versus Aliens. First episode is on the Gabriel Speaks podcast right now. It's about the legacy UFO programs. It's about how 9/11 and the Patriot Act were used to scurry away, bury, and protect these legacy programs. Happy Thursday, y'all. I had to push this live stream back a few times, had a few technical difficulties, wanted to make sure I had everything straightened out before we went live. And we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to start with the 2026 NDAA. By the way, you're watching the Gabriel Speaks podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like and all that yada yada stuff I'm supposed to say. So, as we know, if you watched my show, the 2025 NDAA is where the UAP Disclosure Act finally died. So, 23 and 24, the UAPDA, UAP Disclosure Act, was attached to the NDAA, which stands for the National Defense Authorization Act. But it was completely gutted. So all the stuff Colonel Nell told us about an oversight panel, independently verifying these things, making sure people are getting the information that they should be entitled to, gone. All that kind of remained was the need for these government programs to push declassified videos over to the National Archives. And we've, excuse me, I've displayed a couple of those videos because I think it's important. You never know when stuff's going to disappear from the National Archives. So now they're in the Gabriel Speaks YouTube channel archives. And it's just some old videos, some old UFO conferences, some propaganda that the military released around Roswell. But these are all things that they thought was important enough to keep a record of. So we got that part. And we even have John Kozlowski from Arrow doing, I would say, a little bit better job than Sean Kirkpatrick, because at least he is saying, y'all, get these videos to the National Archives. Quit fucking around and dragging your feet, because the longer you do that, the longer it looks suspicious. So at least we have a guy that's somewhat speaking our language, because the thing about 9/11 and the Patriot Act is that once that happened, that's when really the overclassification stuff happened. So I encourage you to go watch that video if you haven't on my YouTube channel about the legacy UFO programs and how the Patriot Act kind of enhanced those programs, protected those programs, legitimized those programs. But today, we're talking about a few other things. We're talking about this 2026 NDAA because the UAP Disclosure Act is not a part of it. However, there are parts of it that involve unidentified anomalous phenomena, mostly drones. But UAP is brought up a few times in the actual bill. So it shows in the 2026 NDAA will get started. Section 1671 adds a new requirement that the regular UAP briefings to Congress must include details on any UAP intercepts conducted by NORAD or U.S. Northern Command, U.S. Northcom. And I will throw the links down below when I add notes to this video so you can access any of the stuff that I'm referencing. So what counts as details according to the text in the bill is number, location, nature of intercepts, procedures, protocols used, and what data was collected and analyzed. Arrow's director must also notify Congress if NORAD Northcom fails to provide timely info about intercepts. So this is basically Congress saying, if you're scrambling jets, if you're tracking objects, we want to hear about it in the UAP briefings. Congress is demanding a look back window. not just from now on. They want to look back at what's happened previously as well. Section 1672 does two key things. It cuts duplicate UAP reporting, and it centralizes data flow into AARO. It repeals a separate UAP reporting requirement from an earlier intelligence authorization law in an effort to reduce duplication. It clarifies the intelligence community elements and the Department of Defense or Department of War components with UAP data must make it available immediately to AARO while protecting sources and methods. That's another thing I get into on our Legacy podcast. Sources and methods. You'll hear these intelligence folks, as soon as they mention sources and methods in these hearings, these senators understand that, and these congressmen understand that, and women, to mean back off. Don't talk about anything related to sources and methods, because that's national defense. We don't want to give any secrets away, so we can't talk about this. So the idea is Congress wants to know about these programs. It wants fewer siloed pipelines, and it wants to essentially use AARO as the hub. And I know some of you are thinking, fucking great. AARO is the hub, right? But again, when you have these government organizations being stood up by different officials, they're only going to be good as the current directive. So AARO is not necessarily the problem. It could be the solution. But what directives are they going to follow? What's the actual mission of that said organization? And that, I think, is where the debate comes in. Because there's a big part of us that think the whole goal of AARO is to bury these things. Anything legitimate, anyway. Anything with a prosaic explanation, absolutely, have at it. Here's the classified videos, as long as it blanks out any, sources and methods data. Sure, take a look at that balloon. We don't fucking care. But anything legitimate that they have questions about, we still probably won't see, because it will have this classified seal. So the NDAA, the 2026 NDAA, it orders an inventory of UAP classification guides, because this is one thing, if you're researching this topic, the amount of classification guides and the heaps of data that's used to describe some of these things is absolutely insane. So Section 1673 requires that within 180 days of enactment, the AARO director will account for classification guides that apply to UAP report and investigation info. The director may issue a consolidated security classification matrix for UAP-related programs, and they must include what they found in the 2026 annual UAP reports. This is the report required under the FY22 framework. So Congress is trying to shine light on and potentially standardize how is this classified machinery that can keep UAP details locked away from us. It's at least a noble effort for those that are standing behind it, right? They're finally saying, look, you got to tell us the deal here. You cannot continue to bury this and keep it classified. So Section 1671, UAP briefings to Congress must include NORAD and NORTHCOM intercepts plus summaries and tell Congress if they don't report on time. This also is retroactive. So it will go back to 2004 for the first briefing on this subject. Section 1672 removes redundant reporting, and it says UAP data must be available immediately to AARO, not the public, to AARO. Section 1673 means within 180 days, AARO must inventory UAP classification guides and can create a consolidated classification matrix. The results are to go into the annual report for 2026. So, although the UAP Disclosure Act has been completely removed, we do at least have the NDAA addressing a couple of issues. I think the UAP Disclosure Act was maybe a little too ambitious. We have to understand who really controls things in DC, and if they don't want things to get passed, they know exactly how to get that done. Because we saw representatives from the UAP Task Force, by voting for the 2025 NDAA, voted against the 2025 UAP Disclosure Act. Now, Eric Burleson is talking about the UAP Disclosure Act as a standalone bill. And I think that that's a noble effort. But trying to get congressmen and women to hold themselves accountable is tough, especially when they can decide whether they want to sign off on it or not. So tell me what you think. I mean, we lost the UAP Disclosure Act, at least for now. Eric Burleson says he's going to try to push this bill, although we've not really seen any movement. And essentially what the Congress is asking for in the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act is notification. If we scramble our jets, if we have any kind of incidents or intercepts, we want to know about it dating back to 2004. And we want AARO to know about everything. We want everything to eventually report back to AARO. AARO will be essentially the UFO UAP hub for information. That's what they want. Is it what they'll get? I don't know. But at this time, it's what it seems to be. You know, they say one thing, but you can tell what they're actually focused on by the bills. So what the bills tell us are that, yes, the Congress wants to know more, but we don't necessarily want the people to know more. We still want that filter there in place for things that are a little too crazy. I respect Burleson trying to get the UAPDA Act gone through by himself, but I don't know that I see that actually happening. I mean, they couldn't get it through when it was attached to the NDAA. It's just very clear to me, at least, and I think to most of us paying attention, that Congress does not want another body looking over their shoulder. No matter what the subject, it could be UAPs, it could be Bigfoot, it could be, Jack and the Giant Beanstalk. They don't want yet another group telling them what they can and can't do, having to answer to them in congressional hearings. It's not what they want. All right. Moving on to another very interesting topic here. Ron James is the director of Accidental Truth, among some other UFO documentaries. Love Ron James, fantastic filmmaker, super down to earth guy. Hopped into a space in X yesterday and talked about quote unquote disclosure, and talked about what he noticed when he was at one of these UFO briefing hearing things backstage. And I thought this is really interesting because it turns out that even those that are like, excuse me, kind of at the upper echelons of figuring this stuff out and disseminating information and getting information out to us, even those people, it doesn't seem like they really know what's going on. It's as if they're guessing as well. And I just found that super fascinating. So here's a few minutes with Ron James in the Space on X just yesterday.
A very rare thing. There's probably very, very few people on this planet that know the entire story of what happened from biblical times through the modern era of the UFO, the crashes of the 40s till now. And if there were people, they're dead. They're dead. So, this isn't like there's some major group that knows all this stuff. And all these people that are filtering around, I wouldn't have believed what I'm saying right now, except I overheard at this Alien Con backstage thing, Jay Stratton and Gary Nolan and God, it was the All-Stars, and they're all standing around just talking amongst themselves, and I'm sitting in a chair behind them, and they're asking questions of each other and making like assumptions and postulations that told me that they clearly do not know, and I was blown away. I was like, "Ooh, what am I going to hear?" And I heard a bunch of people that are trying to figure it out. And it shocked me because they're supposed to be the people that know. Well, look, if you look back to the 50s when, people don't really remember the history of this movement, but the UFO topic was as hot now, if not hotter, back in the 50s when we had Sanford, we had the Robertson panel. What we've seen since 2017 is literally a repeat performance of the same script. And the knowledge that was available then is pretty much the same knowledge that's available now. It's the same speculation. It's the same theories. It's the same everything. And that's because, these guys, they're going to hold this stuff as long as they can for a variety of reasons. And in Accidental Truth Next, it's called Beyond UFO Disclosure because about 20 minutes into the movie, I put a scene of a broken record because I'm just sick of watching these guys in Washington spin around and waste our time. We're only going to get so far. And so what we do after that in the film is we start looking at how this fits into everything from biblical teachings to the nature of reality itself. And that's where the answers to this truly lie. And when they say we're not ready, we might not be ready. This film's everybody's making these movies about UFO disclosure. It's great. I've made 3 myself, but this movie is the first movie I Accidental Truth moved the needle. And this one's moving the needle into what we really need to be talking about. Starting because we're at a point in human history where these things are not going to be able to be swept under the rug like they used to be. The technology, we're going to be putting private space on Mars. There's going to come a time when the truth of a non-human intelligence interacting with us, several, is going to be, somebody's going to stumble on it. Somebody's going to prove it. The aliens or whatever is going to land and make their presence known. There is something pushing these guys because they know that they only have a limited amount of time before the secret's out anyway. So they're trying to figure out how to cover their butts, disclose because they have to cover themselves because they've committed a crime against humanity the way they've covered this up all these years. They've got to cover their asses to make sure that they get away with it. They've got to tell us as little as humanly possible and still get the whole non-human intelligence thing out and acknowledged before it becomes, irreparably obvious. And so what we're seeing is this orchestrated thing with all these players doing this, and it's been going on since the new version of it's been going on since 2017. And as I shockingly point out in the film, it's almost a decade, you guys, since we got Lou Elizondo. And have we gotten one single thing solid since then that really moves the ball? No, it's been a prolonged dog and pony show. And the reason is they're going to hold on to this information for as long as they can. I know that there's a bunch of companies that are even Skywatcher, and I could name a few, but I don't want to do it. They're easy to identify. There's a bunch of people that are doing this on a for-profit basis. Skywatcher is not doing all this stuff they're doing for fun. I mean, it's so obvious that the between our phones somebody's listening, that we've started just kind of making stuff up. Like, let's tell them that we know there's a UFO in the middle of the desert and see if they go look. Yeah, he was in the Air Force at the time. He was off duty. His UFO story is that they basically had a missing time experience in the desert, him and another officer. But that's not where he's not saying that he got implanted with this thing. He said, it turned up. He lived with it for years and years and years and years, and then finally decided to get it taken out. No, not the stuff that MUFON did. They just said it was a piece of metal, but then it has some weird stuff. It's got like things growing out of it. It was when I was interviewing Gary Nolan the first time, and I just brought it up because I was talking about TTSA, and I said, yeah, and they sent that thing someplace and said that the scientist got all freaked out and said, don't send me any more like that. And Gary's like, well, that's true, but it's kind of out of context. He says, I did receive it, and I sent it back immediately and said, don't send me anything else like that. But it wasn't because it freaked me out. It's because the protocol was not observed. We've got 3 different cases in the new film, and one of them is this sample of material we got from Russia that's got a whole weird story about it. And it finally was analyzed as some kind of aerogel, but the place that analyzed it can't figure out, they can't match it to any manufacturer, and it's got a bunch of advanced elements to it, including crystals that seem to be growing even still within this sample. And that's in the movie too. He was a little miffed in the beginning, but I kind of told him, I said, look, Lou, the picture was going to spill anyway, and I figured if I did it, then I could at least try to frame it properly, which I did at the time. But yeah, so he never said, he didn't say he's never going to talk to me again, but I haven't talked to him since.
Wow. Pretty interesting comments there from Mr. James. And I think kind of going through it one by one, to start out with, he's talking about being at this UFO conference with all of these kind of upper echelon people that he believes should know a lot about what's going on. And he realizes in the middle of the conversation that these cats don't have a clue either. They really don't know. They're guessing. Like, it's the same kind of conversation you would have with your buddies when you're trying to figure out what this stuff is. They really don't know. And that kind of harkens back to what Jim Simivan said on the Leto podcast, which is that it's very scary and we don't fucking know. Like, we have no clue what half of this stuff, we have no clue what 90% of this stuff is. I mean, it's Jim Simivan, so take it for what it is. But very interesting. And then he talks about a sample that he acquired of metal that exchanged a lot of hands, but there were a few things on a couple of these samples that were interesting. Both of them had things growing off of them. One, I believe he said it was almost looked like some kind of a fungus or something. And the other one was growing crystals. I don't even know. That's some crazy shit, though. And a big takeaway is Elizondo. I mean, Elizondo was brought up in that space several times. And it mostly had to do with, can we believe anything that guy said. Not just some of it. Like, can we believe anything that gentleman said? Very interesting. And another reason that, for all of the shit that Twitter, whatever you want to call it, gets talked about, it still can be a great source. You can speak with people you wouldn't typically have the opportunity to speak with and have conversations you wouldn't normally be able to have. And I think that's a giant plus. There's a lot of negatives, but I think that's a giant plus of Twitter. X, whatever. Okay, moving on. We have this story in Vermont. So we know that we have the we have the National UAP Task Force. It's got Luna, it's got Grush, it's got Burchett, it's got a few other members, and they've had a few hearings with some people, but we haven't really seen a lot of action. In fact, any actual action they've tried to produce is dead, i.e. the UAP Disclosure Act. But Vermont said, what about state rights? Like, why can't our state create a UAP task force? I'm sorry, my dog's going crazy. Oh, 1 second. These are the fun the fun surprises that come up during live streams, right? You gotta love it. Okay, so Vermont says, fuck these guys, starting our own task force. So the proposed task force, it would work with federal partners to assess airspace safety risks and investigate UAP reports. So Representative Troy Hedrick of Burlington has introduced legislation looking to set up the Vermont Airspace Safety and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Task Force. The bill reportedly proposes the creation of a state task force to investigate reports of both unidentified aerospace and underwater objects, assesses safety risks regarding airspace, and works alongside federal partners and researchers to discover improved policies. The task force would be composed of officials from Vermont's Department of Transportation and Public Safety, while also opening up seats for lawmakers and experts on the topic. I am not a subject matter expert at all, Hedrick said, the Vermont Digger reported. As policymakers, I think we have an obligation to remain attentive to emerging trends in public safety. According to House Bill 654, the panel would investigate reports of any unknown objects that exhibit performance characteristics not consistent with currently understood technologies, such as instantaneous acceleration, absent observable inertia or hypersonic velocity without a corresponding signature or sonic boom. Very specific. It goes on to say she introduced the legislation at the request of a constituent, lobbyist Maggie Lenz, according to 7 Days Vermont. So I think this is fantastic because these folks are not going to have to play, well, they're going to have to play politics, but they're not going to have to play politics at the federal level with this, which takes a lot of the craziness out of it. And you can really get down to the actual study and studies and what they mean. So they're going to have leaders in the field along with scientists looking into UAP reports. They don't need the federal task force. They got it. They're going to set up their own task force, which I think a lot of states, if not all states, should do. Because as long as it's only the federal task force that handles this information, then they are going to have complete carte blanche over the messaging and narrative that comes out of situations. Just like creating Arrow and having all of the data filtered through Arrow does the same thing. This is what the people in power like. I got into it in the Legacy UFO video, which is the DNI, Director National Intelligence. You had the CIA director, you had the FBI director, arguably two of the most powerful men in the world. 9/11 happened, and they in our Congress said, hold my beer, watch this. And they created a position more powerful than both put together, because it handles every single intelligence organization. They all fall under the DNI. It's almost as if we created a Caesar after 9/11. And right now, James Clapper has been that Caesar. Caesar never gave the control back either. Just a quick note there. So if this is the game the feds are going to play, I think more states need to follow Vermont's lead and say, forget it. Every year we get a hearing, we get witnesses, they make a few statements, and then nothing. We actually lose traction when it comes to getting actual law passed to address this issue. So forget it. What's the use? How many more witnesses can we hear say they saw something strange before we get some movement, before we get some kind of answers, an investigation, and not more political runaround bullshit? Some food for thought, y'all. Now we have some folks going out there saying that President Trump is going to be giving us disclosure. That President Trump, there we go, that President Trump has decided to use the 40th, the 60th, whatever, anniversary of Roswell and come out and give disclosure to the people. And I think we just have to look at the statements that President Trump has already made about this to know that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I believe a big part of it, probably a larger part than we care to admit to ourselves, has to do with this being cover for secret technology advancements. I think at the end of the day, there is some real activity there. Absolutely, I know that. But I also believe there's a huge contingent that use this excuse when testing new technologies. Before Skywatcher fell to shit, James Fowler gave an interview that said, we would have contractors come out to show us stuff that they wanted to make sure we didn't interpret as UAP. And he said that some of the things some of those contractors came out with and showed him, he could not believe it. The breakthroughs, the innovations, the capabilities, he literally could not believe what he was seeing in some instances. And I think our attack on Venezuela is a great example of that. We have technology that's kept under wraps that can do ungodly things. So I wanted to make sure we covered those things. The 2026 NDAA that's coming out. I'm going to list these sections that I referenced specifically after we get done with the video. I'll put that down there if you're interested. But this is something I believe we need to pay attention to. This is the stuff that's getting through and being turned into law. Like, these folks can go on these interviews and they can talk about whatever they want to talk about, angels and demons and everything else. But it's about what gets passed, what gets made into law. And I do think it's interesting that Ron James mentions the Bible and ancient script a few times during his time in that space. We had Diana Pasulka, another very intelligent person, after doing a deep dive into this, that came to a very similar revelation and conclusion. And more we find people that really deep dive into this stuff, that really just go in full on, full tilt. They almost always have some kind of spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. That correlation is there. I don't know if it's causation. It doesn't prove causation, but that correlation is there. Just like the correlation of seeing huge UFO events and then later people in that same area experiencing paranormal activity. Or the hitchhiker effect. Or some of the damage some of these directed energy weapons can do to our brains. Somehow, this is all connected. Maybe it's the same technology, or it's in the same group of technology. I really don't know. I'm trying to figure it out for us. I promise. Doing my research. I'm hitting the books. I'm even using the AI. Doing it all. I think what I'm starting to realize is that there's a government military contingent to this that is completely overwhelming to normal people. And I think that there's also a consciousness, spiritual side of this. And that's why we have so many interpretations of what's going on. Because at the end of the day, folks, we're all just trying to figure it out. And I get weary of anybody telling me they know. How could you possibly know? So it's going to do it for this quick UFO news update. I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of the 2026 NDAA wording that's coming out. Some recent comments from Ron James that he made regarding some of these UFO celebrities, proponents, whatever you want to call them. The upper echelon. The fact that they have no clue what's going on either. And a state taking a stand and saying, we're going to create our own UAP task force. We do not need the federal government because clearly after 4 years, we've got nothing. They have Mr. Grush, probably one of the most pivotal witnesses working on the task force. But he hasn't gone into a skiff? Why? Why? I'm waiting for a reasonable explanation that doesn't involve something about a gun being pulled on someone where you cannot find a single report on it. I FOIA'd it. It's not there. There's no report of David Grush having a gun pulled on him. Doesn't exist. What we're seeing, what Vermont is seeing, there's a huge chance that it's not aliens, right? That it's this advanced tech. But how many times can we allow the government to fuck with us like that? The New Jersey flap was absolutely crazy. We haven't gotten a report on like deaths caused by that at all. We haven't been told how many people that led to have mental issues going forward. None of that has been researched. All that was researched was that we had these drones, some of them weren't identified. Yeah, it was weird. How are we okay with that? We have Libel's Burger, a fucking American hero, kill himself in front of Trump Tower, mentioning drones with unlimited payloads that our enemies have access to. Why is this not being talked about or addressed? I think I know. And I think it has to do, surprise, surprise, with intelligence officials. Contact your state member, your state representation. Tell them, I want what Vermont had. I want our state to have our own UAP task force that cows down and caters to no one. Because clearly the feds are not capable. Call your representative. Tell them that's what you want. Check out the 2026 NDAA. Have AI do it for you. Tell your AI you want any instance of UAP, the word phenomena, the word anomalous. You want it to find any instances of that in the 2026 NDAA. And that will give you an opportunity to review exactly what it says in regards to UAP, UFO, because the UAP Disclosure Act is dead. It's fucking dead. All right, y'all. Thank you for hanging out. Sorry to end it on that really crazy, intense note, but this is what we got going on right now. This is what's happening in the UFO community. This is what's happening with the quote unquote disclosure movement, which is nothing. Nothing's happening. So call your state rep, tell him. You do it. You tell him Gabriel Speaks sent you. You say you want a state local UAP task force just like Vermont. Vermont is no better than us. We cow down to no city, to no state that's called Vermont. We're better. I love y'all. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you next time on the Gabriel Speaks podcast.